Welcome to another episode of Get Gardening. It's been a few weeks since I planted up this pot of pansies, and one job I really need to keep on top of is the deadheading. If I deadhead the spent blossoms, this pot should go on gracing this garden right the way through June. On today's episode, I'll be focusing in my Japanese garden. I'll be taking a tour to see what's growing, weeding the moss bed, and transplanting a tiger eye sumac. Here is the Japanese garden. I'm taking kind of a tour of it today to see the things that are growing, the buds that are emerging, the little signs of flowers that there are, and I'm going to do some weeding in my moss garden today. Here's the rhododendron in the Japanese garden, and the buds are starting to swell. I'm starting to see a little bit more of the white in the buds on the Japanese Andromeda. All my Japanese maples are showing signs of life. I can see the buds are starting to emerge. The crocuses are mostly done at my Japanese lantern. There's still a few holding on. Can see some green at the white birch trees. In the Japanese garden, I have 3 tree peonies, and when the tree peony buds emerge, you can look inside and see that there are buds in 2 of my tree peonies. I have a Bergenia, and this is the first year that I've had it, and I can see hints of pink developing. Can't wait to see these flowers open. They tend to remind me a little bit of cherry blossom. Speaking of cherry blossom, this is the cherry tree that I planted about 2 weeks ago, and there is some buds emerging. I do think the top portion and some of these side branches are dead, but I'm excited that there are some signs of life. Take a look at this lone crocus blooming in my moss bed in the Japanese garden. I've been working to develop this moss garden here in my Japanese garden for the last 3 years, and when it's looking really nice, it's absolutely a beautiful part of the garden. However, it is rather high maintenance in the fact that tons of little weeds seem to love living in this moss garden. And just when things start looking good, it's when you have to start weeding it. And that creates a problem because the roots of the weeds seem to grow quite happily in with the moss. So when you go to pull out the roots, you inevitably pull out pieces of the moss, and sometimes you lift up entire segments of it. You can see here, this whole piece of moss starts moving. And if you're not careful, whole pieces can come up. Here's an example of an area that I had to pull out a big weed, and of course a big chunk of the moss came out with it. There are 2 types of mosses, I believe. One are aerocarps, and the other are called pleurocarps. The one I have is pleurocarps, which is great because they colonize quickly, but they also tend to have a lot of weeds in them. Tiger sumac has become one of my favorite shrubs. It does not have any flowers, but the leaves are such a beautiful lime green, and in the autumn they turn a beautiful orange scarlet color. And every time I've ever moved one, the roots that remained in the ground have always sent up another plant. And here is actually 2 plants that I'm going to dig up today and move them to a new location or put them in a pot until I'm ready to put them somewhere. It's a great time to move it when it's just about ready to spring into growth like this. You can see the buds are starting to swell. It's warm enough now, but not too warm where it's in growth. So I like to use a fork to dig it up. That way I can try and get as much of the root as possible. Every time I do dig it up, though, it seems to send out another plant. It's not invasive, but what little root has been left behind typically forms a new plant. And what's great about that is I get a new plant for free. This one seems like it's pretty deep. I'm going to use a shovel to finish digging this one up. Wrong. This is actually one plant. This is one plant that came from one piece of root. I'm going to end up putting this in my bulb garden, but for the moment I'm going to go ahead and just put this in a pot and grow it on until I have a spot for it. I've potted up this twin trunk plant. I get a new plant for free. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you're able to get out there and get gardening.